So this predictable revenue book, based on Salesforce.com, I created the outbound sales team. So they call it the Sales Bible of Silicon Valley. This is more relevant if you have some sales, like I couldn't say if it's like 150,000, 100,000, 500,000, but when you have some sales and you're trying to figure out how to best structure a sales team, it's not so much about how you get off the ground in the first place, from 0 to 1, but the other book, actually, I'll just grab the cover.
Where did he go?
He's never done.
Oh.
Anyway, that's this one. Does anyone follow Jason Lemkin of SaaStr?
Yes.
Okay, so we did this together. And this really is more of a growth Bible, so if you're getting off the ground, this is a better one to start with. So now I'll go over why. So, let's see here. And just remind me, everyone's pretty much in the stage you're still defining your product and what you're going to sell, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the thing that was, the Predictable Revenue book came out 2011, and in the years between it came out and working with companies, the number one reason companies struggle to grow, and the thing that was missing from predictable revenue, we call the topic we call nailing a niche. It's kind of like product market fit, but a little different. And so that's what is in the beginning of, this is part 1 of this book. And I've got a PDF I'll share with Janine. She can pass around of the chapter. But that's why this is probably the most relevant, is nailing a niche. So there's, to start, when you're getting rolling and you're getting feedback and you're designing your product, and you're almost always reaching out to people who know you, because that's who you know. It does help to be in these kinds of groups. The problem is with getting feedback from people who know you is that they know you, and it's harder for them to give you really honest feedback. So what's important too is this idea of how do you want to use your relationship to get off the ground, because they're a big advantage. But whether it's in the product design stage first, and then later as you start to sell something, you want to cultivate the skills to be able to work with people who don't know you, because that's where your growth is. So in the product design stage, the people who don't know you, where there's not like a relationship to bias them, will just give you, in general, better, more unbiased feedback on, hey, is this something that would be useful? Do you want this or not? Because in people who know you, there's going to be a tendency to be more accommodating. And they may not tell you that, they may not be as blunt as they should be, that your idea is just no good, or your product, your feature. They might try to sugarcoat it. So you do want to get that kind of feedback, but you also want to get feedback from people who aren't afraid to give you the real, unbiased opinion. So in this idea of nailing a niche, really I think the simplest idea to understand is this idea of need versus nice. So where are you a need to have versus when are you a nice to have? People don't buy nice to haves. It's just too much work. So you as a product and company are not a need to have or nice to have. It's like, to which customers which customers need you versus when are you cool but they don't really need you. And you're a nice to have when you do a demo and they say, wow, that's cool, and they never call you back. That's a nice to have. Just if you think about when you're getting yourself practicing putting yourself into the mind of your customer. And I realize some of you might be still searching for which customers are the right customers. Right? So the idea is you're trying to put yourself really into the shoes of your customer, to the mind of your customer. And it's a bit tricky, so that you can tell, that gauge, when do they really need you and why. to help figure out which kinds of customers are the right fit, and then what do they want, and then also how do you describe what you do to them. So if I step back and describe nailing a niche, really what that means is getting clarity on which customers need us the most, what is the problem that we're solving for them in their language, and how do we describe what we do in a way that is interesting to them. So it's a little different. So product market fit, it's probably, I don't know if it's that different or not, but this is kind of like the way we think about it. It's not just finding the right product for the right type of person. It's also learning how to talk about your product in a way that it fits their language. Because what happens is founders talk about your product in your language, and you don't kind of spend the time to figure out how do they think. So how can I reword what I'm saying so that it fits the way they think, rather than the way I think. This is the same thing, everyone talking about features versus products. How my product is so great, it can save you money, it can save you time. It's kind of blah, blah, blah. It's how do you get into their heads so you know what they want, and you can use the right, it's basically your customers speak Spanish, and you speak English. How can you learn how to speak Spanish? The equivalent is their customers have their internal lingo. But if you sell a product to salespeople, their lingo is going to be they're not going to talk about increasing revenue and decreasing costs, right? That's just like such vague fluff. They're going to talk about, it could be win rates, sales cycle lengths, it could be pipeline management. There could be very specific metrics, really specific to that use case. And you can be selling a great sales app, but if you're not learning how to speak their language, they're just not gonna, people are just too busy. They're too overwhelmed. So the thing is, there's this Uber trend, this age of overwhelm. There's more channels, there's more information, there's more content, more messages. So everyone, there's just sort of so much, there's too much stuff. So there's always this natural choice paralysis. So the way to combat that really begins with this idea. It's really about focus in different ways, but nailing a niche means, again, the more specific you can be about the type of customer who needs you, which means also the type of company and the type of person or people in that company, the easier it is to write really specific messages or languages or value propositions to them so it can resonate with them, to cut through all the noise they get. And a really common founder's mistake is trying to sell to too many types of customers. Right? If you have a product that can be used by hospitals and by banks and by software companies, you should pick one. You don't have to throw the others away, but just pick one to start with. We have this fear of missing out, like, oh, but I can sell to anybody. But if you do that, this is where people end up with websites that are so vague that they don't mean anything. We have a network scalable architecture optimized end to end for scalability, performance, and flexibility. Flexibility, that doesn't mean anything. So everyone does this. I guarantee you're all doing this. The way to get past that, so here's some actual specific tips too. The interviews you do, I'm assuming if you're doing them, you should do them. Interviews are a great way. Again, ideally with people who don't know you, but again, it's kind of hard to get interviews with people who don't know you. And you're really not there to sell. You're just really trying to understand how they think, what's important to them. If you can do the job of your customer. So some of you probably did jobs, let's say that you were in a marketing agency, and you're creating something for marketing agencies, right? You've already walked in the customer's shoes. Great. If you're creating something for someone and you have not been in their shoes, see if you can find a way to be in their shoes, which can literally mean do the job they're selling to. If you are creating a restaurant app and you need for restaurant salespeople, how can you kind of do restaurant sales for a bit just to get that hands-on feeling for it? So I think a lot of entrepreneurs and even senior companies who are bigger, right, up to, a lot of the companies that we consult with are, I don't know, like $1 million to a couple tens of millions in size. And everyone often is too busy to do the work they need to do to actually be successful. So I'll give you an example. Okay, so you have a sales team. There's a sales team I just talked to a couple weeks ago. They're trying to sell now to TV stations, and they're not having success. So I'll say, well, hey, did you interview any TV directors of sales at TV stations? No. Did you interview any general managers? No. Did you interview any salespeople there? No. Okay, well, you're kind of guessing at the emails or phone calls. What if you just interviewed some of them? Which, by the way, is a pain in the ass, which is why it doesn't happen enough. Because it's like slow down to speed up. Not only interview them, but can you go visit them, like do like walking tours, or how can you spend sort of this very unproductive, unscalable, gritty, hands in the dirt time where you're not making calls, you're not sending emails, you're not prospecting, you're learning, but in order to get smart so that you can actually know what you're doing, who the right people are, what they care about, and how to communicate with them in a way that they get interested in what you're doing. So a lot of people shortcut that step. Going back, so that's one. How do you figure out the people who need you the most? And also, there's no magic bullet here. It's experimentation, by the way. You have your best hypothesis now. You know, at some point you'll get some customers. Some will work out and some won't. Then you'll be smarter. So you get your first 10 customers. And then after that, you'll be able to better predict, okay, what should our next 50 look like? Again, some of those will work out, some will, some won't. And then you'll be smarter again for the next 100. So it's always this learning process. And if you're trying to go straight for the win, usually you just end up, like you're trying to get the perfect customer from day one. It's like trying to get the perfect product from day one. It's impossible. You get something good enough, you get out there, get some feedback, and you go back to the drawing, and you improve it. For an ideal customer, you get something good enough, you learn some stuff, and you go back and you improve it. It's an ever-evolving learning process to who needs you and what does the product look like and what's the messaging of it. It's one reason why there's a chapter in here called Do the Time. We say it takes at least 2 years to know if you even have something that's gonna, something real. And it can be 5 to 10 years to get to some sort of exit. So we're talking, usually this takes years longer than you want. And if you think it's some sort of, 3 years to a bunch of money, because you've seen that on Facebook a lot. I mean, it happens enough, but you got to be prepared for to be a grind for quite a while. It's gonna be more, again, the interviews, it's like product development, realizing your product, is crap and went back to the drawing board, or realize you completely wrong and went back to the drawing board and did something right. So, but this is really the beginning, and this is the thing that most companies that struggle to grow have not done, is they haven't really nailed that niche. They don't really know who needs them the most. They don't really know why. So what happens is they'll get to 1 million, a couple million, 500,000, 5 million, based kind of on relationships and word of mouth, and then they hit the wall. They plateau because they don't know how to get beyond the relationships. They used the relationships to get off the ground, but then the relationships became a crutch. So, who needs you and what do they care about? Again, the chapter I'll share with Janine has a couple matrix exercises and things, but really it's about, I think, being insightful too, about there's a lot of kinds of customers, and how can you better segment them so you can be more insightful about the different types and which ones are a good fit. If you're selling to restaurants, I mean, there's a million kinds of restaurants. There's big chains, there's small chain, mom and pops, there's hospitality groups, there's by geography, by size, there's quick service, there's sit down, restaurant, and there's just so many types of restaurants. So in the early days, it's kind of impossible to be, you can only do so much, but I think it's important to when you're looking for those little clues, why does someone, let's say you have someone who's really interested, why? Like, what is it about that person in that situation that they really want this? And how can you find others like that? So not rushing through this and really trying to be like patiently plotting your way through that customer discovery and the product design, and knowing it always takes a lot longer than you want, and that's just that's just the way it is. And if you try to shortcut things, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So let me think if there's on the nail on each side. I'll give you one example of messaging, what that means. So when I talk about messaging, it's like, how do you describe what you do? If I was an accountant, I could say, let's say I'm at a party. Hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm an accountant. Oh, that's great. It doesn't really tell someone that much. Or I could say, I'm an accountant for media companies. Okay. Or I'm an accountant for media companies with at least $10 million in Los Angeles. Okay. Or I'm an accountant with media companies that focus on movies. Right? So the more specific you get, the easier it is often for someone to sort of pinpoint where you are and if you're relevant to them or not. So again, don't be afraid to get really specific with the kind of company that could be who needs what you do. And then going back to that messaging, if you're at a party, if you're marketing yourself as, hey, we're the best accountants in the world, which a lot of companies do, we're the best DevOps service in the world, or the equivalent is, no one cares. That doesn't mean anything to people. Versus saying, if I'm an accountant, what's the result I want to create for them? So this is a really important thought process, getting into the minds of your customers. They don't care what you do. They only care about the result you create for them. They don't care if you're an accountant. They only care if you're going to save them money or keep you in compliance with taxes. So, you say, what do you do? I'm an accountant. I help my clients save money and stay in compliance with taxes. You can always get a little more specific, but you're trying to focus on what are the results my customers care about. I want us to talk about those first. And if they're interested in the results, I can promise, then they'll be interested in how I do it. But all the entrepreneurs always talk too much about what you do. And again, people don't care. Your friends care, but they're only there to help you get off the ground. So that's probably the number one area that is really worth diving into, as I'm sure you're already doing. Let me pause and see if there's any questions on that. Again, we call it nailing a niche, or nailing a niche here.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you have any other examples of things that people typically shortcut? I saw customer discovery, product design, networking. Were there any other ones you recommend not shortcutting?
It's really hard if you haven't hired people before. When you want to get the right person, and it's really tempting to get the wrong person fast, or someone who's good enough fast, and you don't know how to do anything well until you've done it well and you've done it poorly. So it's hard to hire well unless you've hired poorly. It's hard to code well unless you've coded poorly. It's hard to sell well unless you've sold poorly. So especially in the early days, when if you're looking for a partner or looking for a coder or looking for someone on the team, just on one hand, really trying to find someone who's the right fit, and I think cultural fit. It's really easy to overestimate their skills and underestimate how important just that kind of compatible relationship is. And it's hard when you're really busy. Does anyone here have a family and they're doing this on the side at night and weekends? Yeah. It's especially hard when you have a day job and you're just doing this on the side and you're so tired and you're like, oh my God, it's taking forever, I'm not going to do this, and I just can get someone to help. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know if you can, it's huge leverage if you can find the right person to help you in some way. Whether it's a partner, whether it's a personal assistant, whether it's an Upwork person, but it's kind of hard to find that right person. So anyway, Okay, let me talk about sales for a bit, and really like the first mistakes that entrepreneurs make around sales. This might be skipping ahead a little bit, but let's say that you actually get some sales, and it's a good problem to have where you have some sales and you're sort of, it's like too much time and you want to like hire someone to take on sales for you. So I'm just know if this is going to be this year for some of you, maybe in a year, maybe 2 years, who knows. Most common mistake is you hire a salesperson to take over the selling for you. So first of all, actually before that, you need to be part of the selling. When you're doing the discovery, when you're actually selling for money, when you're at that point, you need to be in part of that so you understand how your customers buy and what you need to do to sell. Whether you like sales or not, it's just a vital skill that an entrepreneur has to have. Then, after you've been part of 10 or 20 sales, it's easier to say, all right, what do I do? And to say, if I'm going to hire a salesperson, at least now I have a better sense of what kind of person I need to hire. But the mistake is hiring a salesperson, a closer, too soon. You're like, I'm tired of this, I'm going to hand over the sales to this person. Turns out they can't sell anything. And they don't have the founder's magic, and maybe they sold you, whatever, they don't sell anything, and you end up firing them a few months later. So the best way to go, really the lowest risk, is to find someone who's a junior person who can take over some of the lower level sales activities for you, whether it's setting appointments for you or responding to leads or proposals or kind of stuff that you get bogged down in and don't want to do. Work with that kind of, find a junior person for 3 to 6 months. You have some systems, you're like, okay, this is working. And then you're in a better place to make the next sales hire or next decision on how you want to grow sales. So kind of more smaller steps, especially in the early days. It's just, if you can avoid a lot of making progress is avoiding potholes. It's not even about making the right decision. It's about avoiding one that's going to waste your time and money. If you can avoid those major mistakes, that's probably 80% of it. Because you hire the wrong sales leader, and that's unbelievably costly, both in time or money. Or the wrong technical person. So on the sales side, I think that if you're really early, one of the two main lessons: one, make sure you take ownership over knowing how sales works, because you've done it, whether you do it yourself or with someone else. Somehow you're a part of it. What I did, I had a company, we ended up raising and wasting $5 million. This is a long time ago in the first bubble. But one of the mistakes I made was abdicating my understanding of sales. I was, founder, CEO, co-founder, and hey, Meph, one of the kids discovered me. Cross my walker. I'll be out in a bit. Yes, go ahead. He has to go pee. Yes, you may. So I abdicated my understanding. I was like, hey, here's I hired a VP sales. You deal with it. What I should have done was be hands-on and more involved. That way I'd understand it. So when it wasn't working, I would have felt like I could do something. When I abdicated and sales weren't working, I had no idea. I was just like lost. So you want to be able to delegate, not abdicate in sales. So that was the first one, and then just trying to be thoughtful about who you hire. So this PDF I'll share with Janine has it's a section called four phases of building your first sales team. It just sort of walks through the first hire you should make, and second hire and third hire. Again, you might be a ways off from that. I'd also have the nail and niche chapter and some other stuff, some of the newer. So this book is getting updated. So some of the newer stuff for this book. Let me see. Questions so far, either on sales, niche, finding product market fit.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, you talked about, of course, we start with our relationships and then getting outside of that, so it won't be so biased.
Yep.
What incentive can you give to someone that you don't really know to take the time to talk with you and go through this? I mean, I think I'm having a hard time doing that.
Yeah, it can be a little tricky. So, are you sneaking up on me? Yeah. It's Maverick. He was like creeping over, like looking over. All right. We get 4 out of the 9 are adopted. Hey. I'll see you in a little bit.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye. Love you mostest. That's the mommy name. So it's a little tricky. So I think that, first, that's one reason why relationships work, is they'll meet with you, or referrals from them. Like, someone who, so every time you meet with someone, you can say, who else do you know who I should talk to? So that helps. Incentives, I don't really know. I have, a Starbucks card. Sometimes it work. I don't have enough actually experience with that. I mean, people talk about it, but I can't think of someone who's actually done it. But I'm sure someone has. Another thing you actually could do is create an interview series, a real one, whether a podcast or blog series, and that way people feel like they're actually getting interviewed, and you actually have to publish it. So it's a little tricky, because when you do an interview where you publish someone, that kind of interview would be different when you're just trying to extract useful information from their brains. But in some ways it can be done. But the interview series is also a great way to just meet people, build connections within the area where your domain if you need them. Again, ask for referrals to people who you should talk to. So there's a lot, and plus a chance to learn. There's a lot of great benefits about doing an interview series, whether it's again audio, video, written. Big fan of that. In fact, that's something our oldest daughter, so 25. She's not technically our daughter, but she basically is like daughter. She's starting a food business. She's selling kind of bars, and she hasn't started a business before. But I keep telling her really the best thing you do is just find some mentors, right? The whole point of this, people who've already done something like that, who aren't too far ahead, and try to learn from them. And a great way to do that, if you're not sure, is an interview series. I think a lot of people are willing or happy to talk to you. They have to feel like though, they're kind of relevant. It's not just for you. There's something in it for them in some way, where there's an enjoyable conversation. They might learn something and might get some promotion. So there's no. It takes work. It's the bottom line is there's no, again, like everything else here, there's no magic answer. There's no silver bullet. You gotta just, if it's important, you gotta find a way to do it. And the interviews are one of them.
And then my other question was, with those interviews, one of the things I'm kind of struggling too is trying to understand the revenue model for my competitors. I mean, a competitor is not just going to tell me. So, do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, that's true. What space are you looking at?
Patient recruitment for clinical trials. I've done cold calling and it was pretty awful.
To recruit patients or to recruit some other?
To interview patient recruitment companies to find out, how they're finding subjects, how they're running their business. But they're not going to tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be tricky. But would you sell to them? Who are you selling to? Or are you just creating a competitor to them?
I'm being a competitor. I'm just trying to get patients in, and then figuring out how much patients would be once I get them in a study.
Yeah. Is there a way to find out patients who've been recruited?
Yeah, but that depends on what study they're doing. I think I want it overall.
Yeah, I could see that being tricky. Especially because you don't want to lie or be dishonest.
Of course.
Yeah, that's a little tricky when you're trying to interview direct competitors. But there's always ancillary people like partners, patients, people who in the space, people who blog, people who do videos. Again, it's kind of I don't know if ancillary is the right term. Incidental. People who've left competitors. If you looked on LinkedIn, if you know a key competitor, you can put that competitor's name and you can uncheck current business and maybe see who used to work at one but now they don't, so then won't be as paranoid about it. Maybe they want to be an advisor if they're a credible person. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the advantages of LinkedIn. But yeah, there's no easy answer here.
Thank you.
Other questions for Aaron?
Yep. I would say too, sales is a life skill. If you feel like the word sales has any positive or negative baggage, like, oh, I don't want to. Here's a common one in Silicon Valley. I don't want to have to sell. I want to create a product that's so great that people just buy it. You can have that desire, but don't succumb to it, and actually don't let that dictate how you build your business. Because everybody needs to sell, especially entrepreneurs, whether you're selling yourself, your product, or an idea. And again, this is something I learned the hard way, which is, sales is a life skill. You can use it anywhere. It's incredibly valuable. A lot of customers need help buying. Like, they need you, in order to make a decision, they need you to sell them on why they should change or why they should buy your product. So this idea of people just coming and buying it is kind of a fantasy. Dropbox, there's some companies have done it, but more often than not, a lot of people are just stuck are indecisive or busy or overwhelmed. Remember the age of overwhelm? So it can make decisions harder because they're just overwhelmed. So the ability to sell and market, if you embrace that, it's a learnable skill, like playing the guitar. Right? If you can learn. I am just learning this. I suck at it still, but sales marketing are learnable skills, and you need them in order to make money as an entrepreneur. So again, greatest misconception: people just kind of see it and come in and buy your stuff. No, you'll realize that there needs to be a lot of selling, a lot of education to sort of, here's a better way to do it. Here's why you should change, because the greatest competitor is no decision. The greatest competitor is, I'm just going to do what I'm doing. That's what you're really fighting against, is people who are kind of stuck in their habits. They should change, but they don't because of a lot of reasons. And it's up to you to figure, how do I sell them on doing something that's good for them? And at some point, turning that into a sales team with a repeatable, if it's B2B, but a repeatable model, or a B2C could be a partner system, or whatever the repeatable, predictable sales model is. Because that's also what brings money in. So anyway, it's like embracing sales. It's a little early. Like, once you start to feel like you can do some sales, if you even read 3 sales books, that's plenty. They all kind of say the same. Predictable revenue is a bit different. So maybe this book plus a couple, like spin selling. But it's an important skill. Marketing is an important skill. So now, though, really the most important step is, like, how do you get into the minds of your customers, and how do you kind of figure out which types of customers are there and which ones are the ones that need you the most? That's really number one at this point. Yeah.
Some advice that we've heard from founders in the past that I've been really thinking about a lot is this idea of failing faster and failing failing in a large way was one specific phrase, and I've been trying to really specifically try to understand what that might mean versus what we just heard from you, which is like be careful, avoid major mistakes, just take it a little bit at a time. Is there any kind of distinction there? Is there any types of things you would say, mistakes that you can make faster that wouldn't be as big versus major mistakes you should absolutely avoid making that you can't take back? And are there any specific kinds of roadblocks or any specific turning points that you'd be extra careful about?
No, I mean, I think more of the classic ones where you have a product. It's like, how do you the mistake is you try to build it too much into it versus trying to get like the minimum out the door. And not about like the fail big, fail faster. Yes, it's like, how do you try to get things into people's hands faster in some way and not try to make it perfect. So interview series, right? You can put that on the shelf for 3 months, or you could say, you know what, I'm just going to reach out to someone I know and try to get an interview done by Friday. and I'm just going to do like a 5-minute video just to get something started. There's neither is the wrong way to do it, but there's usually like a smaller, faster way to learn or get some traction in some area where you might have some perfectionism. You might think, wow, I really have to get this thing perfect, and it might take me 3 months. Well, how can you break that down into smaller steps to get something done in the next 24 hours even? So ultimately, like, you can't, people can give you all the advice. You're gonna fuck things up, you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna get some things right. There's no way to avoid that kind of ups and downs of the journey. There's just not. And I think someone said there's studies now that show that when things go well, you don't learn when things go well. You really only learn when things don't go well, when things fail. So, I mean, failure is not something to be afraid of as something wrong. It's just something to look at as a learning opportunity. I mean,
yeah, kind of off of that, are there any mistakes that, like, you would red flag as you can't undo this mistake in the entrepreneurship process, or is it all in the realm of you learn as you go kind of thing?
Well, in the big picture, besides death, everything is right. If your company fails, you can start another one. I mean, there's things that will, like, if you commit fraud and go to jail. I mean, if you get out of jail. I mean, so in the scheme of things, no. I mean, really, everything is unwindable. There's some things that hurt a lot more than others. So too, when I was younger, when my business went bankrupt and I had a divorce, those are two incredibly painful experiences. I learned a ton from them. So am I glad for them now? Yeah. Did I hate going through them at the time? Yeah. So I think it's what you don't want to do is make mistakes and then not learn from them, because then they're a waste. If you make mistakes and you learn from them, it's incredibly valuable. So that's where you actually learn the most. But when you're making the same mistakes and doing it over and over again, like when I was in my 20s-ish, I probably had a series of like 6-month relationships over the years. So the same kind of thing, now I can say it's a mistake, but if you're making the same mistake over and over again, why?
Thank you.
Any other questions for Aaron? Okay, thank you, Aaron. Really appreciate it.
And